Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Watches with Dennis. And I am here with my Saturday live stream. And I am today going to talk a lot about Watches and Wonders. In fact, Watches and Wonders is the only topic for today's discussion. So I don't know if this is going to actually take the full hour I usually go, but that's okay. We don't always have to go as long as we typically do. I did have a live stream again last night. I don't know if I'm going to continue that or not. I'm so tired when I've been doing them, which is much later in the evening than I normally would even put a panel together. However, it's been an opportunity for me to kind of do like top 5 things. A couple weeks ago, I did top 5 watch brands that I've owned, but I have no interest in owning again. And then yesterday, I did top 5 brands I have never owned, but I would really like to own. And so as a format, I kind of think that works to a degree. Maybe there's a better day or maybe a better time to do it. That's the part I have not decided on yet. So anyway, let us go ahead and get caught up with that. So I mentioned the video. I'll drop a link in the live chat for anyone who wants to go ahead and watch that. I don't think the processing's all the way done, so it's probably not at the full 720p that StreamYard does or whatever. Like, I don't think the chat's showing yet. It takes about 12 to 13 hours for a live stream of mine to process and get fully, I guess, uploaded by YouTube standard. It's weird. But every comment that I highlight and stuff, that'll all be visible, so you can watch that whenever. So there is that, and then there's really nothing else to update on. On the wrist this morning is Moser Pioneer Center Seconds. This is the funky blue with the black DLC dial. So let's go ahead and let's get started by catching up with chat, and then we will jump into, I have one article, it is linked in the show notes from Watch Pro that will kind of be the basis for this discussion, but this is going to be much more just sort of a theoretical conversation about Watches and Wonders and what it means for the hobby at this point and the industry as a whole. So good morning, Kevin. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you could make it. Thelonious, welcome to you as well. And Thomas with the Escapement Show. I was able to catch part of your show. I missed at least the first hour because I was still asleep. But I did wake up and did go and see that you were continuing your conversation on independent watches. So people can go back and check out the Escapement Show and see some very funky looking style. You know, I talked about funky blue, but you want to see some funky looking watches. They've gone ahead and covered some very unique looking independents that may be worth your time if you are into those sort of watches. So regardless of the type of watch you're into, you're probably into Watches and Wonders in some capacity. So when I came into the hobby and actually started collecting, Watches and Wonders is the only thing I knew about. I had read a little bit as I went along about Baselworld, but like Baselworld predates me. So I never followed any news out of Baselworld. My experience with Baselworld has been limited to some of the older watches I've gone and explored, or footage that I've tried to find on older models. Sometimes it's Baselworld footage that I've found on YouTube, or more often articles that are written out of Baselworld. But a lot of people compare them because Baselworld, as near as I can understand it, without doing a deep dive on it, was the big show. It was the watch show. And the analogy I want to put together is E3. So I don't know if you guys are into video games, but well, I mostly do pinball. I one of my podcasts I host, my co-host does video games, kind of builds that content out. But I like video games just like I like pinball. E3 was the industry show. Like everyone who was anyone was at E3. It was a huge deal that all these brands would come together. It was a media focused event. And then times started to change and brands started to pull out in a couple of ways. Some, and this happens at Watches and Wonders, some will have tangential events, but not a part of the actual event. So in Watches and Wonders speak, they're pirates. They know that an event's going to go on, so they host competing or alternative venue events at the same location, namely in the same city, not literally usually the same exact hotel, but within the same city. So that's what started to happen to E3. So E3 in desperation tried to broaden its appeal. It started to allow the general public to show up to the shows. We've seen a little bit of this out of Watches and Wonders as well. And anyway, E3 died. E3's gone now. There were some attempts. COVID kind of basically put the final nail in the coffin for it. It did try and come back. And by then, all these other brands had established something different. So Watches and Wonders is in a different boat because Baselworld kind of went down. Swatch Group pulled out of Baselworld, and that was sort of, I guess, seen as the beginning of the end. Baselworld became a shell of its former self without Swatch Group. And so Watches and Wonders has risen from the ashes of Baselworld, but Watches and Wonders does not have all the brands that peak Baselworld did. So really quickly, again, there's a link in the show notes so you can go and you can read about this. Watches and Wonders in 2025 is going to take place the first week of April. So they are now at I believe, the largest they have ever been. They're going to have, so far at least, they've confirmed 60 exhibitors because they've brought in Bulgari's the big one that they've secured. But they've gone ahead and also got Cross Studios going to be there. Meistersinger, the one-handed watch company, if you're familiar with them, they're actually a relatively affordable brand. They're going to be there. And so they've got a couple others that were new last year. Like I think it was new last year was HYT. They're going to be back. So anyway, 60 brands. So when Watches and Wonders was formed up, it was a combination of LVMH, I believe. No, I think it was. Actually, I need to cheat and look at the article here a little bit. So when this got revived out of the ashes of Baselworld, there were some groups that came together and decided they were going to try and put something on. So Rolex, Patek, and I think it was LVMH. No, I'm wrong. It was Richemont. There we go. Apologies for the mistake. So Patek, Rolex, and Richemont made Watches and Wonders, but LVMH is on the board now. So LVMH is all on board, literally on the governing board of the nonprofit that does this, but they are also on board, obviously, with the concept, as are some other, like Hermes is involved in such. So my point being that Swatch Group is still missing. And they're not the only one that's missing, but they're the big conglomerate that's missing. There are a few other really notable brands that are covered in the article that are missing. Breitling is not at Watches and Wonders. Audemars Piguet is the Holy Trinity brand that is not there. Girard-Perregaux. And it's weird because Sowind Group owns Girard-Perregaux and Ulysse Nardin, but you can see in this list of the brands that are going to be there, Ulysse Nardin is. So I don't know why GP is not and UN is. That's weird. But I mean, I guess GP just has to continue to disappoint. But anyway, so here on the screen, if you're curious, is the list of all of the brands that are currently confirmed. So it's most of the heavy hitters. It's not all Swiss either. Like Langenzonen is there. Grand Seiko has been there for a number of years now. Some of the popular independents, like H. Moser is there. They've been there for a number of years. Parmigiani out of the Sandes Foundation. I forget. It's a pharmaceutical conglomerate that owns the watchmaker. It's weird. They've been there a number of years. They'll be there. Anyway, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but a lot of the major brands are there, but not Swatch Group. And that's always stood out to me because in the lead up to Watches and Wonders, we normally see a mega Omega drop, a mega Omega. So this year it was the White Dial Speedmaster. But every year it seems that in March, Omega releases something to kind of, I don't know if it's to seize on the thunder or steal some thunder, or maybe that has nothing at all to do with thunder, but they end up doing something in order to get some attention to their brand. And it's always been before Watches and Wonders. I always do it just before. So the conversation that I kind of want to have today with those of you who are participating live is, what do you think of Watches and Wonders? Like, can Watches and Wonders, it's getting bigger. It's bigger yet again. It's not like E3. It's not on the downward slope. It's been growing. Can it catch up to what Baselworld was? Do we care if it catches up to where Baselworld was? And can it eclipse where Baselworld was? Now, let me go ahead and catch up with the chat real quick, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts. So go ahead, and there's nothing really to look at with the article. It's really just there for context, and I've given you that context. So see, Thomas says, really enjoyed your live stream from last night, Dennis. I would love all of those Vacherons you showed. I think a lot of people would have loved pretty much all of those Vacherons. They were very nice watches. Good morning, Tuna. Thank you for being a 99-cent club member, and welcome to the live stream. Good morning, Trap Vision. I was glad to catch part of your live stream this morning. Glad you could make it. Oh, David, another 99-cent club member, and one of my few moderators for this. I don't usually need a lot of moderators for this channel. So good morning. Glad you were able to be here, and they were on board to be onboarded to the board. Exactly. And now LVMH is right up there with their major luxury conglomerate competitor, Richemont. And yes, The biggest thing about Parmesan out of Italy. No, it's very confusing. It's spelled differently than the cheese, but it's said almost the same way. The founder's name is Michel Parmigiani. So the name of the brand is Parmigiani. And then I think it's based out of Fleurier. So Parmigiani Fleurier. So anyway, I hate that it sounds like a cheese name because every time I have 2 Parmigianis, but every time I say the name, all I do is think of the Kraft green tub of Parmesan cheese that you can sprinkle way too much of on your pizza. That's all I think of with it. It took me a while enough to get past it to be willing to own the watch, but I figured that was too trite even for me to get hung up on, especially when I liked the designs. So Medgas guy, good morning to Dennis and chat from the Arizona desert. Good morning. I've actually never been out to Arizona, but I was at a conference and heard a few presentations from people out of Arizona, and that's the closest tie-in. I think I have an aunt who lives out in Arizona, actually. I'm not sure. She may have moved back to Alaska at this point. I am unclear. Tuna, welcome. Oh, you already welcomed you. You still get a residual welcome. No swatch means kind of no show. And that's where I wanted to have the exploration of that. Good morning, Joel Bolt. Glad you could be here. Good morning, Brave Soldier. Thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Hope things are going well for you this morning. Neff, good morning as well. And for being a 99-cent club member, I tip my non-existent hat to you. And David says, Watches and Wonders E3, the watch community is more affluent, enjoys pomp and circumstance. The engagement and events are much more desirable compared to, and I'm sure you're going to continue that thought. Foxhouse Guitar. Oh, Foxhouse Guitars Los Angeles. It's quite a mouthful. But looked like it was pretty pronounceable. Glad you could be here. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, so I'll go ahead and throw this back up because I don't like my head being all huge like this. So yes, David, you bring up some good points about the markets are very, very different. Video games are egalitarian to the extreme, right? I mean, there are even like low-cost subscription services like Microsoft's Game Pass at this stage that allow a lot of people without a lot of money to actually get and do a lot of stuff with games. Gaming's always been super approachable. That's why it's one of the biggest industries in the world. It makes more money than Hollywood by a lot at this stage. It's that approachable for people. They basically need one hardware device, which can be a significant investment. But like you look at a PS5 or a Switch or whatever, I mean, we readily talk about watches as affordable that are more than those things. So, and not just like, it's not just like a me thing. Like a lot of people are like, there are plenty of watches that we would classify as affordable that are more expensive than those high-end gaming machines. But those gaming machines are also produced in much higher volume. So there's a lot of economy of scale. The thing with, let me give you a little bit of, I guess, my perspective from YouTube. And different people on YouTube are going to have different approaches probably. But here's the thing with Watches and Wonders. I'm doing the comparison here because I also podcast in gaming. I ran into this with E3 as well, and it was really interesting. So to me, so let me start with E3. So when there was E3, and Tony, who is my co-host on Eclectic Gamers podcast, when Tony and I would get ready for that episode, we would have the E3 episode. There's one episode. Called it the E3 episode. We generally didn't cover pinball unless there was absolutely something that had to be said. It was all about E3. And all we did was info dump everything that was getting revealed out of E3. We talk about all the major games. Obviously, we couldn't talk about all of them. We talk about all the most interesting trailers, any of the things that we thought were flops that didn't turn out well. You know, what was the controversy? Who won E3? People always want to know who won. It's always a contest. So who won E3? You know, we'd go into all of that, and it would usually be a pretty meaty episode. And it was one of my most favorite episodes to do just because it felt so rich and I mean, how often do you get so much stuff to be able to talk about? So let's pivot to Watches and Wonders. For me, in the YouTube space, and maybe this is because I'm doing YouTube and it's by myself and it's not a podcast, I can't approach it the same way. So you see this list on the screen. I'll make it even bigger. You see this list on the screen of like these 60 brands that are going to be there currently confirmed for 2025. It's not even just one watch per brand. Some of these are going to drop multiple watches, new dial colors for existing models. A lot of them are going to have a new model or a new take on an existing model line. You all know, most likely who are watching, you all know how Watches and Wonders goes. I don't have like an info dump episode. The way it works for me with YouTube is Watches and Wonders starts. All of the watches are revealed right on the first day. You have a window, a view window. I'm going to let you look at peer behind the glass of a small YouTube channel. This is how it works for views. I have to strike as quickly as possible to cover as many of the major releases as possible if I want to get eyeballs on the videos. Every day that passes when I release a video deeper into Watches and Wonders or post Watches and Wonders does worse. But the brands you choose makes a big difference. So you'll notice a lot of YouTube channels. I think a lot of them are doing it the same way as me. You'll notice, what do we start with? We start with Tudor. We start with Rolex. They're going to be right there. And then after that, it's shaky. It depends. Did someone do something really, really cool? Like this year in Watches and Wonders, IWC had some pretty interesting watches. They got quite a bit of early attention. Not as early as Tudor, but they got early attention. Sometimes Patek, I often will do Patek, though those videos don't often, I think because of the price point, they don't tend to do all that great. And it's kind of like that. So I actually did a series of them, but you can't do too many because YouTube also gets upset. This is when people talk about the algorithm. YouTube will get upset with you if you put out too many videos at once. The assumption will be the quality is too low, I think, is the idea. So I don't remember the current rule of thumb. It's like, don't do more than 3 videos a day. So it's like, you can't just put out like, hey, I'm going to, as soon as all the watches are dropped, I'm going to take the day off work, do 60 videos on all the brands and drop them all at once. They will drown themselves. It won't work. The algorithm will not allow them to be easily discovered. So it's just a whole thing. Now, a lot of that's driven by YouTube, but here's the long and the short of it is Watches and Wonders doesn't work as well for me as E3 did. And maybe it's just the format that I create content with, but it's like this laundry list dump style. It's really cool from a hobbyist perspective because I just feel overwhelmed. It's like you're rolling around in watch news. It's exciting, right? And then all of a sudden, it kind of feels like you're in a drought for like 2 months afterwards because there's nothing else to talk about except stuff that you just saw. A lot of it's not immediately available, and there's nothing new to say. So you either said it when it mattered to people, or you have to wait until you can get your hands on the watch. If you can get your hands on the watch. Let me tell you, Piaget ain't exactly sending me watches to do reviews on. Not that I've asked, and I'm not asking them to send me any either, because it kind of defeats some of my purpose. But so for me, E3, and then we Tony and I had to cross this bridge when E3 went away. It was like, well, but was E3 really good for the industry? And like Watches and Wonders, I'm not sure this is that helpful. I agree with what David said about them being very, very different in terms of like the affluence, the collector thing. But is it actually really healthy? I'll say from a content creation perspective, I like much more having watches just constantly dropped every week. Like, again, it's like easy content to have conversation. It's not just content for content's sake. It's we can have these conversations on this channel or on Discords or on forums, on Watch Crunch, whatever, because there's this constant trickle as brands start to just push out watches. I know some in like the print media side seem really frustrated with all the watches dropping all of the time. That's overwhelming. But like from an enthusiast standpoint, I like it because it's like, hey, look, we talked about Grand Seiko last week. Oh, Montblanc dropped something new this week. Let's talk about Montblanc. Oh, look, there's a new, 50 limited piece all Longanzona that no one's going to be able to buy, but it looks cool. We can talk about that. If there's not something new from Alpina, maybe Alpina's got something. We're going to talk about them instead. So there's I just think it's easier to digest than when it's in a show like that. This would be cool if you were there, but if you're not there, I don't think it works. And I think that's what happened to E3. People weren't there, even though they opened it up to the public, and fewer people wanted to go when Sony pulled out of it. Nintendo was pulled out of it. So Xbox was the only one left. And then Xbox is like, why are we doing this? We're not even the most popular brand. So so that's kind of the scenario where I'm not sure if it matters if it ever gets to Baselworld levels or not. But anyway, I want to go ahead and catch up with chat to see what some of you guys have to say about any of this stuff that's been going on. So Trap Vision says, I personally think the consumer base has changed since Baselworld and how watch brands are followed. That is probably the case. They definitely, brands I would say are better now. I still don't think most watch brands are great at this, but they are better about having an online presence. They're better about using social media. They're better about having websites. Some of their websites are pretty bad still, but some of them have made some vast leaps. And consumers are much more willing, I believe, to consider. Maybe this is more a COVID thing than anything else, but the bottom line is just like people want to work from home a lot now, that more so than they did pre-pandemic. There are a lot more people that even with expensive watches are comfortable shopping online, especially if there are return policies where it's like, it doesn't fit right. You don't like how it looks on your wrist. You didn't pull the tags off it. Just send it back. It's the Amazon model, right? Getting used to the idea of just being able to easily exchange things and doing it all from the comfort of your home and the closest UPS store. I think that has made a big difference, Trap Vision. So I think that I don't know, it's the consumer base as in what the base, the type of people that make up the base is different, or the base itself has a change in philosophy. And that's just one piece of it. David says, nerd gamers don't want to hang out and schmooze. Affluent Swiss watch people, all they want to do is make contacts. Sure, but again, it's great if you're there. And maybe the battle drum being beat for Watches and Wonders or a return of Baselworld. I still hear people say they wish Baselworld would somehow miraculously come back. And I don't think they want Watches and Wonders to go away. It's like Geneva Watch Days. They want a third one. They want Baselworld, Watches and Wonders, and Geneva Watch Days. They want all of them. They want everything. They want every month to be a show. We can't have that many shows. I know this is a big hobby, but it's not that big. But I think everyone they like certain things from all of them, and so they want a taste out of all of them. But yes, the purchasing audiences are different between video games and watches. I just think the idea of a mass show with multi brands like a shopping mall, it quit working for E3 for a variety of reasons. I'm assuming some of those same reasons are why Baselworld went the way it went. Watches and Wonders is having success. I mean, we've got 60 brands here on the screen. I'm assuming there's 60. I didn't count them. But people are still feeling like it isn't where it was, which I understand. Swatch Group they are a major player. Omega alone is the third largest in terms of dollars generated watch manufacturer in Switzerland. Them not being there says a lot. It does. But they have almost all the other major luxury houses at this point, and even some of the key independent ones. So they're doing pretty good also, which is what a lot of this article, which again is in the video description if you want to read the actual content of it, is to be available. Thelonia says, it doesn't seem worth the spend for some of the big brands. For example, Omega was not at Watches and Wonders, but everyone still was blasted with press about the White Speedy and Black Aquaterra. Yes. And actually, this article has a part. I'm going to jump to it just so you can see the section of it. It's real. I think it's real. I was going to say I thought it was in the early part. I think in the early part of the headline, but they had a little part of the year. Here you go. There's a little paragraph about halfway through the article where one of the people who organized as Watches and Wonders referred to the issue of pirate brands. And I'm not saying Omega is the pirate brand per se. They've done a very good job working the media. But the pirates are those that actually set up in Geneva, but they're not at Watches and Wonders. So they set up in the city as competing or alternative venues to go and consider for your various watch purchases, watch press, watch purchase, watch entertainment, however you want to think of it. And I have an analogy on pinball. I always have to do a pinball one, right? So let me bring a pinball one up. A few weeks ago, I had an invite to go to Chicago to cover a Jersey Jack Pinball's new Avatar, the Battle for Pandora pinball machine that they've put out. So I had a work conference, so I turned them down. However, after the fact, I learned that a lot of pinball media people that did go, other podcasters like me, some of the YouTube people on the pinball side who showed up, they then, when they went there, Jersey Jack paid for the trip. They'd pay for your flight. They'd pay for your hotel. They had their agenda. They had their thing at their factory. But then a lot of those people went over to Stern Pinball, which is the largest pinball manufacturer in the world, and had just the prior week revealed the Uncanny X-Men pinball machine and went and did content and got information from Stern. And Stern didn't pay for anything, didn't pay for hotels, didn't pay for food, didn't pay for air flights or mileage. And so a question that I got asked from Zach, who I host the pinball show with, my other pinball podcast, had asked me, like, what did I think of that? Like, did I think that was distasteful or not? And different people have different takes on it. I know I've heard some others who felt it would be inappropriate to go when you were on the dime of someone else. My stance was different. My stance was, no, if there's like these pirate things going on in the area, and let's say Rolex paid for me to go to Geneva and I went to Watches and Wonders, if during my downtime, it's none of Rolex's or anyone else's business what I do. So if I'm already in Geneva and Zen is renting a tent out, across the river or whatever, I don't see any qualms about going and getting content, even if I'm doing it on the back of, like, the plane ticket's already been bought. That I cover more things with it and be efficient, to me is a non-issue. But you see why brands would do it, because they don't have to. And this happened with E3. When E3 started to fall apart real early on, Sony wasn't out of the city. They were there. They had a competing event. Nintendo had their Treehouse Live thing that they would always do at the same time as Watches and Wonders. They were basically a part of the schedule. They just weren't paying any money to the actual event. They weren't helping subsidize the event. That was a problem for the event, but it wasn't a problem for the brands. And it sure wasn't a problem for any of the media, because it was all still easily accessible. And that is a tough thing to solve. I used to work for an association of local governments, and we would have a conference every year, and we had to fight this with our exhibitors. We would have our exhibitor hall, and we'd have 100 vendors. And some of those vendors wanted to wine and dine people. They want to take them out for steak dinners and do all of that. And that was fine. But we also would find out people who didn't get booths or pay sponsorships to us would be in the hotel taking out suites, inviting people up in the evening or taking them out to dinner. And how do you control that? Because they are an entity it's not a secret when our convention is. So they as an entity can pretty easily piggyback. We could do certain things, like we could make arrangements with our hotel contract. We started to do that, where we forbid the hotel from renting out to any, like we got right of first refusal to veto any of these businesses getting suites and stuff. We could basically force them out of the hotel because we controlled so much space that we would warn them. We'd say, look, they're going to be pirates. They're going to try and come in, and they're not going to want to pay us any money, and they're going to spend thousands of dollars trying to convince elected officials to buy their equipment. And we don't want them in this facility, but we couldn't keep them out of the city. We didn't have that much pull. So it's a challenge. And I assume it's a challenge in a lot of industries. So Neff says, I played Skyrim back in the day. That was the best game ever. You probably heard about Arrows to the Knee, but you're not much of a gamer. Well, they will probably do a new Elder Scrolls eventually. David acknowledges the knowledge of Skyrim. David, let's be fair. Everyone knows Skyrim. Even like small children who have not been born yet know what Skyrim is. Joel Bolt says, did not you know you were a gamer? I miss E3 a lot, but I know that each major company, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, have their own shows. It's less overwhelming. Maybe that'll happen with watch brands. It's weird. That's why I kind of wanted to do this topic for discussion with those of you live. And if you're watching the recording, just leave comments on your thoughts, because I'm definitely interested in other perspectives on this. Because unlike E3, Watches and Wonders, it's getting bigger. It's now up to 60 people. It's gotten bigger. I don't know if it's gotten bigger every year, but it's bigger this for 2025 than it already was for 2024. And 2024 was pretty impressive. It's just obviously still missing a very key Swiss component called the Swatch Group at this point. It's missing other things too, as I noted at the start of the video. Breitling not being there, that's kind of a big one. Gerard Perregaux not being there, that's kind of a odd one. A big one, it's a well-known brand. It's odd though, because Ulysse Nardon is there and it's under the same ownership. So that may be more a strategic thing, like GP doesn't have something that they feel that they want to reveal yet or something. I wonder. I don't think it's political in their instance, whereas Swatch Group, it feels like there's some reason like they don't want to do this. Like they think, I don't know if they think they're going to help underwrite an event and Rolex is going to get all the attention, and they don't see why LVMH and Richemont should benefit from Swatch Group's money. or Swatch Group is hurting financially more and they don't want to go into this sort of thing. I do not know, but those are some of the things that I'm wondering about. But yes, Joel Bolt, yes, I've been a gamer for a very, very long time. David says videos and early watch drop access to big YouTubers is a big driver of relationships, most of which are at Watches and Wonders in person. This is very true, and the larger channels are there, and they get hands on and they'll do interview from a content creator perspective, and not just YouTube, any content creator, podcasting, written articles, whatever. If you're at the event is any of these events is great. Saves so much time. You have a lot of you, if you've ever experienced it in any industry, probably understand. It's so much nicer to be able just to walk down a hall, schedule your meetings, do your interviews. It's all in one place. You're not driving around all the time. You're not traveling from city to city, or in the case of watches, country to country in some instances. It's not efficient in any other way. They basically have to really pay a lot of money to get you there. If you're going to go to Watches and Wonders as an event, I mean, you'll probably pay your own way to get there because there's so many brands that it saves them in that regard, and you get a lot of exposure and attention. And again, if you think you've got a product that can win out, get a lot of attention, like the super accurate for a long time perpetual calendar IWC did, I mean, what a great thing for IWC. That's the most positivity I've heard about IWC since I got into the hobby. The only other thing I could ever remember was when they dropped the Igeneur, and everyone was like, why is this twice as much as it should be? Thelonious says, like Norcane, Oris, Panerai, Tag, which I love, Raymond Vale, or is the W pronounced as a W? I will say Raymond Vale. We'll assume it's German. And others literally got zero love. In my opinion, it would have made more sense for brands like that to release when things are quiet. Yes. And some of the brands like Zen are over at a competing event that happens. It has a weird name. It's like, I can't remember. It doesn't sound like English is the first language of whoever phrased it, but it's like a small indie offshoot. But other than Zen and I can't remember, there's like one other brand there that I've recognized the name of. Like I don't know any of the other brands there. Yeah, it's tough for some of these. Oris got some attention, like when they released the Kermit Pro Pilot X, for example, which I mean. But yeah, the other ones, no, definitely not. I can't remember. Tag's been doing some right moves for a lot of people lately, but yeah, Raymond, Panerai, and Norcane, I can't remember ever getting any really good buzz out of any Watches and Wonders that I've seen. I know we've talked about some of them when I've done one of the things I've tried to do to kind of mimic the E3 format is I've often, after Watches and Wonders, had a panel where I'll host one of these live streams, but not just me. I'll get like 3 other people, and we'll talk about like our favorite watches and stuff from Watches and Wonders. That's about the best I've been able to figure out to try and put it together. Those videos, they're fun to do. They don't do very well viewership wise, but they're enjoyable from my perspective, which as a hobby channel is the key thing. Trap Vision says Watches and Wonders has the same vibe as a car show. New brands showcase new models. People go crazy over their favorite brand, and then the top YouTubers content vomit that particular brand for weeks. Yes, and as watches, the way watches work, and I've talked about it before, is the funny thing is it's often not even model specific with watches. It's brand specific. So you look at the Swiss watch sales chart, and I've already mentioned about Omega being number 3, right? It's just behind Cartier, and Rolex is number 1 on that sales chart, but that list is not the order of YouTube success. Tudor is way down on that list, but historically speaking, Tudor is like the best brand to talk about on YouTube. If there is a new reveal of Tudor and I have time to put a first thoughts video together, I do it because that's gonna honestly, it's gonna get over 1,000 views in a day. And for a little channel like mine, that's a lot. I have plenty of videos that only get a few hundred. So it's just, and it's all off the brand. It's not like my take was any more interesting than my take was on Chopard. In fact, I might be one of 2 or 3 people who cover a Chopard watch, but no one cares about Chopard, so they don't watch it. So there's a certain brands have, Seiko's the same way. Seiko videos do very good. And that's because a lot of people like to own Seikos. A lot of people like to own Tudors, apparently. And Rolex videos do great because everyone loves Rolex. So I insert eye roll. Yeah, it gets a little tiresome because it's, because even though there are a lot of models that get dropped every year, it's only a few brands that see that level of performance. That just like there's just this draw. Tim Masso's talked about this a lot on his live streams that he does for the 1916 company. Like there's certain things he'd like to talk about, and on occasion he'll do them. Like he just did this 10 favorite Omegas, but he acknowledged in the I watched the recording of it. He's like, this video will not do as well as his other stuff because it's all about Omega, and it's just that's not popular enough to reach the levels if he were to cover something that's broader. And that's the case with a lot of these brands, and it's tough because you hear people, they'll leave comments or they'll live chat and they'll say, I really wish someone would talk about whatever. I had someone who asked me to cover the Chopard Green Forest dial LUC that came out in Watches and Wonders, and I did. It's last I looked, it is my worst performing Watches and Wonders video of this year. It's just not a topic anyone else cared about. It was a fun watch though, so it was worth doing, I think. But David said, the issue with E3 was the comments that the releases got drowned among all the other companies. With your own event or pre-show event, you can have room to breathe. Yes, I agree. But the challenge is, and we're seeing this now, watch companies, by and large, many of them are drip feeding us throughout the year. Seiko is a poster child of this. That's like they got a new watch every week, at least, it seems. But on the flip side of it, does it cause... I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. Does it cause brand fatigue? Do you get tired about hearing about constant Seiko releases because it feels like it's just a factory? I mean, it is a factory. It's a literal factory. But does it just feel too assembly line? Like, does it feel like they're not really being creative? Because how can they come out with this much stuff? And in reality, they have all these design cycles. They're just drip feeding it all out, scatter it. Again, it makes my life easier for giving me plenty of things to talk about throughout the year. So I like it. But I've seen others, like I think Ariel Adams with a blog to watch has complained about why are there this many drops happening this often? It's overwhelming. They're actually getting lost in the shuffle because everyone's doing this now, by and large. I don't know. I don't know the answer. So you all might have a better take than I do on it. Foxhouse says, I would definitely want to go, but it's only tutor from the YouTube crowd. Yep, because tutor gets the clicks. And that's why. Maybe some of them truly do feel Tudor is like the best, most favorite brand. I know some that they truly do love Tudor. I've owned a couple. They're very nice watches. So it's not, I don't hate on the brand or anything. And I ain't above doing videos on them either. But I wouldn't want to talk about them all the time. I can only get so excited about the 80th colorway of the Black Bay. It's just, and that's true for anything else. I have the same reaction to the latest tree that inspired the latest Grand Seiko dial. I really like a lot of the Grand Seiko dials, but after a while, it's hard to talk about the same specs over and over again with, the birch wood is horizontal now instead of vertical. Wow, what a twist. Neff says, I prefer to see watch releases metered out, gives equal attention to the brands, and doesn't leave you in the watch dregs for 2 months after. See, yeah, I lean that way as well. But it is exciting still for me to see something like this, to see a Watches and Wonders and just all this stuff. I do have fun going to their website and going and clicking on all the brands. I didn't like how they did their website this year. Watches and Wonders has its own website. All of their photos on their website this year only seem to be about one model, no matter how many the brand had revealed. And then you had to go to the brand's website to see about all the other ones. And I'm cool with the brand's website, like having the better photos and such, but I do think all of the stuff being highlighted should really be shown on the Watches and Wonders website, just so I could easily remember like I'd go and I'd look at IWC and I'm only seeing one of the watches. They actually had 2 cool releases this year. It wasn't just that perpetual calendar. But when you went to Watches and Wonders, you only saw one of them on the website. It was a very odd choice. They did not do that the prior year. I went back and checked. So I don't know what changed. If it was just they got overwhelmed, or maybe the brands were like, don't show everything. Try and route everyone to our own individual websites to help better promote us. I don't know. I don't know the motivation, but I think it was a mistake. Tuna says, these days I would expect that YouTube and social media is far more important to the brands than any kind of trade show. Possibly. But I know, and again, Ariel with a blog to watch, because I listen to their podcast, and he talks about this more on his superlative. Thank you. None of you corrected, or maybe you did. I'm so far down on chat. I haven't read everything you've fixed yet. But anyway, on the superlative podcast, I know he's had on some brands before, and he feels, I don't know if this is really accurate. I think it varies a lot by brand. I think he's right sometimes at least, but feels a lot of them still haven't really figured out marketing. They're still in the mindset of the ADs are to do the marketing, not the brands. But then they also want all the direct sales. So then they kind of get rid of the ADs and start doing the whole boutique thing like Audemars Piguet has done. Again, I think it varies a lot by brand, but I think they're still not entirely sure how to properly market a lot of stuff. I am seeing a lot more out of them on social media, and Swatch Group is a key one that's doing a lot of it. But I think we can also say Swatch Group's lost the plot on some of these things as well. Like, do we remember? Me and Pepperidge Farm remember. Do you all remember when the moon swatches with the gold dipped plated seconds hands came out, and they did this whole write up about the strawberry moon, and it's like they asked Chat GPT to take a Grand Seiko press release about nature, but melodrama it was I almost actually threw up in my mouth when I read it. It was so bad. It was like, no one honestly believes any of this, right? Like this whole, we only forged this under the light of the strawberry. It's like, you've got to be kidding me, right? What did the crystals tell you to do this? Or it was really hokey, really hokey. If there was a better way to convey it, I would have released it like my dead girl in a lawn chair t-shirt that made fun of that Audemars Piguet campaign. That was also ridiculous. But the So Strawberry Moon thing, I didn't know how you turn that into a shirt. But that one deserves to be made fun of. Maybe I'll think on that and I could come up with one. I'll sell a whole 2 shirts. It'll be great. Trapvision says, I wouldn't mind going to Watches and Wonders to see companies like Hublot, IWC, and Jaeger-LeCoultre just to start. I mean, I'd love to go. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Neff says, Time to Watches, if I recall correctly. That's the alternative venue for Zen and some of the other smaller brands. Yes. And you see where my hang up was with the name Time to Watches. I don't understand it. So are we using watches? I'm assuming we're using watches as a noun. So it's time to do what with the watches? Time to watch watches? Time to, you see, anyway, I don't want to belabor it. It's a bad name. Yeah. But thank you. That is the name. I'm sure of it. I feel its wrongness in my bones. Trapvision says, YouTube is definitely a major source for Watches and Wonders. With that said, in recent years, Tudor seems to be the most talked about. Yes, Tudor is, I think the reason for Tudor, well, I mean, the obvious is Hans Willdorf Foundation owns it and Rolex. So baby brother, alternative brand, sister company, honestly doesn't really matter. There's the Rolex DNA is believed to be in the Tudor watches, and for good reason, not just the ownership chain, but what historic Tudor is, the fact that Tudor today leans into vintage looks, which look like old Tudors, which look like old Rolexes. So they've got all of that. Also, they've been pretty well positioned price point wise in that some people call it the entry luxury space. A lot of other brands that were around that price, it's a lot harder to find. Like new Tudor prices used to feel comparable to new Omega prices, but Omega keeps driving their prices up. Richemont has been driving their group's prices up. Tudor's starting to occupy a space where they're not facing as much competition, and the competition they are facing, like Bell and Ross and such, I feel, is less well known. So their name is getting better recognition. All that being said, though, when it comes to the amount of money Tudor makes on that Swiss watch chart, they are not jumping up like how Breitling jumped up. They are not having that level. Their YouTube success is in no way indicative of their actual sales success. Breitling is not a YouTube darling brand to talk about, but they have done way better than Tudor. And you wouldn't know it watching YouTube. But yes, it absolutely is the most talked about. Tuna says Raymond Weil gets no love, nor for that matter does Frederic Constant. I hear more You're right. Neither of them get much support. I do hear more about Frederic Constant by and large, um, but yes, they are relatively neglected brands. Same Thelonious ads. Same with Bomb and Mercier. Yes, that is another one that I do not see much about, and I myself don't talk very much about. I don't know if I've ever talked about a Raymond Weil watch. Maybe once. I think I had a request once. Frederic Constant I brought up a couple of times, and I don't remember last time I talked Bomb and Mercier. I'm assuming I'm getting all the abbreviations right. Apologies, I am not, but I do try and do well with those. Neff says, I'm wearing a Tudor right now, and I don't understand all of the hype. They're nice. They're not the greatest things ever. They're nice, and for a luxury priced watch, they're approachable. They're relatively affordable. And if you're willing to wait, go gray or go used. They unlike Rolex, they drop a decent amount, so they're pretty easy to get into. So I think it plays it safe in all the right ways. They're almost always attractive, almost never offensive, and well engineered. So it's for a lot of people, and this is I've noticed with a lot of, and every collector, of course, we're all different, right? We all approach hobbies different. When there are a lot of people in this hobby that I like brand diversity. So I've never owned more than 2 of a brand at a time in my collection, but that's a collecting strategy. Another strategy a lot of people have that I don't agree with mentally, like for me, but they clearly agree with a lot is if they find a watch that they like, they are all in on that brand. We see it a lot with Seiko. We see it a lot with Rolex, and we see it a lot with Tudor. Now, Seiko is helped by the fact that there is a vast catalog of very different looking watches at pretty approachable price points. So I've understood that one a lot. And I've understood Rolex from the opposite angle in the sense that it's not necessarily price point approachable, but if you are someone who's absolutely terrified about losing money if you were ever sell your watch collection, Rolex is like the safest bet of maintaining the most value. And so people that are in the hobby, but they really actually, they might talk a game about being okay with watches losing value. If they only own Rolex, you can, in my view, you can tell that they actually have maybe it's a subconscious fear, but there's a fear there. But I've known plenty of others that say they got a Rolex and it fits so great. And I must admit, like Rolex bracelets and such have been some of my favorites I've ever experienced. That it's like, that's so comfortable. Why would I try something else? I like this. This works. I like everything about it. I like the design. I like the size. I like how it wears. And so that kind of happens. And I think Tudor benefits from that as well. You get a lot of that similar aesthetic. For a lot of people, they wear really well and they're well engineered. So I think that kind of is what tends to drive it. So let's see. Thelonious says, I think it's it kind of feels like only roughly 10 out of those 60 brands gets attention at Watches and Wonders. Now I'll throw those back up here again. I'm trying to make the screen a little dynamic, so I'm bouncing around. I don't have a lot of tabs. I have no tabs. I have the one tab to show you guys. Foxhouse says, and I'm a person that has owned 5 Tudors. Now I have none. And I don't have either of the 2 that I've owned. But I've thought about getting another one. I just don't think I'd wear it enough is the thing. And that I'm trying to make sure I consider that a lot now before I make any purchases, because it's such a hassle to get rid of watches. I have, for those that have watched for a while, I think over in the summer, I put up 7 of my watches for sale. One, my Zenith, I pulled and decided I was going to keep it. I've sold everything but my Oris Pro Pilot now, but it's taken months and it's just, it's tedious. Box them up, deal with tire kickers, deal with people wanting me to ship to countries I said I wasn't going to ship to, but they didn't read the details. Dealing with people that you tell them that and they argue with you like they somehow are going to convince you to fill out a bunch of customs paperwork. It's just a whole thing. And lowballs. I love lowballs when I'm already the lowest price on Chrono 24 and you lowball me by cutting the price in half. Thank you for making me take the time to click 5 buttons to cancel your request. Anyway, but we're not here to whine about that. So let's see. Tuna says, the leaves and skies of Japan. We must know them all by now. You would think, Tuna, but they will never run out. There will always be a new angle of the mountain. There will always be a new day to look at the river. There will always be a new month that the leaf will blow a certain way off of the tree, and it will create a completely different dynamic, completely different. So it's just one of those things. Tuna adds, I agree, Thelonious. Frederic Constant has some nice releases, but they don't get much credit. Medgas guy says, I want to go to Watches and Wonders and then buy something over there. I never really thought about going and then making a purchase while I was in Geneva. If I went to Japan, I would be sorely tempted to buy a Grand Seiko. I did own a Grand Seiko. I loved the dial, and that's about it. So I'm like, would I wear it? I don't know. It would be hard for me not to buy a Grand Seiko if I was in Japan. I know a lot of people do it. I'm just a lemming following along, but it feels so. Yeah, if I was in Geneva, it wouldn't be Watches and Wonders specific, but yeah, it would be tempting, I suppose, if I was in Switzerland to buy chocolate and a watch and a bank. Right, those are the three things they're known for: banking, watches. Which, all right, I don't think I could buy a bank. They probably don't sell to Americans. The lady says, you're crushing the abbreviations. Well, okay, thank you. I am trying. I've tried really hard to learn these things. I just can't pronounce any of them. Tuna says, Raymond Weil do decent enough watches for the money. I think lately they've been more interesting in the sense that they feel like they've gotten, they've been doing more creativity, I don't know, leaning into some other directions than where they used to. But it's still never been a brand where I saw something that I really liked. And so it's hard for me to get excited about wanting to do content on them. Trap Vision says, I agree with you, Monk. There's only a few popular brands highlighted at Watches and Wonders. Neff says, we know all the leaves and lakes, but what we don't know are all of those 256 dial colors, all in the same cases. I like how you did 256. You went full VGA. And that's really Grand Seiko's greatest victory of all, is their VGA color scheme. Koji says, heck, if you're in Japan, get a Creedor. Actually, that's a good point. That would be a much better, and I bet I could actually see some in stores because trying to find Creedors in the US is not the easiest thing in the world. And Creedor has quite a price range. It's not all that like Ichi 2 porcelain dial 5-figure stuff. They do have some stuff that's expensive, but not like that expensive. Felony says, I couldn't imagine spending all that money to fly to Geneva and not being able to touch anything. Oh, no, I'd touch something. I just don't know if I'd buy it. Touch it, sure. I know. At Watches and Wonders, I think they let you touch the watches. I think that's some of them. I've heard some of the booths get really particular, like they don't want anyone walking on the carpet. And it's like, why'd you put carpet down if you don't want people to walk on it? I don't understand. That's kind of weird. Maybe rethink your life. I don't know. I'm not here to judge them. But anyway, that's really all I wanted to discuss. So I guess my final takeaways is Watches and Wonders is getting bigger. It's clearly, without Swatch Group, I don't think it can be properly compared to Baselworld. I don't know if we really care, though. That it's grown, though, shows that it is working. Like the brands are getting what they want out of it. I think even though they do open it up to the public, they've kept it, unlike what E3 tried to do, they've kept it more as a focused media event, and I think that's smart for them, especially with the rise in so much watch media. Much like video games has a whole media industry, watches do too. Pinball does not. Pinball, all the media is amateur. But so given that with your monochrome watches and your worn and wounds and your Hodinkis and your Oblongata watches, like there's a good reason to go ahead and do that before you even get into all the YouTubers that like to go out there and make their content and do all of that. So I think it makes sense as a good way to get a lot of the media together. I don't think we need a third show. I think that and Geneva Watch Days is sufficient. But that's kind of my current take on it. Tuna asks, do Timex attend Watches and Wonders? And then he laughs. No, they do not. They are not for 2025 currently. So here's the current list. In terms of the more affordable brands that attend Watches and Wonders, because they're not all expensive. Oh, this is an interesting topic that I will lead into. We got plenty of time. I'm going to lead into another thing. But if you cannot read these very well, Alpina, they're relatively affordable. Some of these brands I do not know well, so I'm going to have to skip around a bit as I look and read through them really, really quick. Frederic Constant has some relatively affordable watches. That term I'm using very loosely, obviously, for some of this stuff. IWC, Meistersinger, they're new for this year, but they do have affordable watches. Mont Blanc, if you're not getting the Minerva movements, they're kind of entry level luxury, so they're not too bad. Nomos Glashütte, they're not too bad on pricing for some of their watches. Nor Oris, yes, all the Oris in-house stuff is relatively expensive, but they still do a lot of ETA-based movement technology, so you can still get quite a few of their watches closer to the 2,000 price point new, and much less going gray. Those are the main ones that jump out to me as being more on the affordable. I mean, Tag has affordable, Tudor has certain affordable, like the 1926s and stuff. Affordable luxury. I don't know the best way to say it. But I'll catch up with chat. So no Timex. I'll catch up with chat and then I'll ask my question. See what you guys think about some of this. Space G95 says, hey, guess I'm late to the party. You are, but that's okay. You can always watch the recording or just not watch it at all. That's all. You don't have to go back. I'm not going to ask people to go back and suffer through a live stream. Junior Johnson, hello from Michigan. Hey, I was in Michigan a few months ago for a conference in Detroit. So I finally got to try Detroit style pizza. Neff says, never heard of Ruta Silva. I don't know anything about it. The name rings a bell to me, but I'm not sure. Koji asks about Ferdinand Berthold. Maybe. See, some of these I couldn't remember, like Van Cleef and Arpels. If they had affordable watch, I just don't remember the price points on a lot of this stuff. Tuna says, well, I suppose that Fossil is out of the question. Yeah, I mean, Fossil's not there, and they don't send, they own Zodiac, and they don't send Zodiac out there either. So, but I guess I'm not too shocked. I don't know how many new models Fossil does. Zodiac obviously does a lot, but I don't think they make all that many watches. That's not a prohibiting factor, but they don't sell them for a lot either. So there's some of those aspects. Thelonious does note Raymond Weil is relatively affordable, and I did not name them, and I should have. So that is a good point to stress as well. Norcane, he notes, also makes models under 5K. Koji says, I'm shocked that Angelus is there. They were there last year as well. And Tuna's like, no. Van Cleef is not affordable, Dennis. What are you? And Med Gas Guy's like, Dennis, no. All right. I just thought their name sounded cheap. Okay. All right. I apologize. Don't look at VCNA. I'm incorrect on VCNA. Do not be thinking, hey, maybe do I want a Longines or do I want a Van Cleef? All right. That is not the right route that you want to go down. Okay. Here's the question I wanted to ask. Here was a complaint that I saw a number of people make, more so out of the print media side from this year's 2024's Watches and Wonders. Their complaint was, having been there, them going out there and seeing it, one of the big frustrations was, and this kind of ties to what we just went through and Van Cleef and all the rest of it, that it's too expensive. Not going to Watches and Wonders, but that all of the wonders were so unobtainium for the vast majority of collectors that it was a frustrating exercise in luxury flex, that all of these brands were showcasing things, and so much of it was six-figure and above. And it was like, where is the stuff that people might actually be? It's like, is this a concept car show, or is this a car show with cars that the public is supposed to buy? And the thought was, from some of them, that Watches and Wonders is supposed to be a blend. It should be aspirational pieces, unobtainium pieces, but also affordable pieces. And I think one of the individuals, I can't remember if it was Hodinkee or where it was, someone, maybe it was one of the Worn and Wound podcast people. I can't recall. But someone really stressed they felt that that's part of the reason why Tudor got so much attention. Yes, Tudor is Tudor, and Tudor is always going to get attention. But they're like, Tudor was one of the few brands that had releases that people could actually buy. Like, people could say, I could save up for that in a year or two, or I have the money saved up for that. That the IWC stuff that got the attention was way too expensive for anyone to be willing to buy. And it was true for so many other things. Obviously, Longa's an expensive brand. Some of the, like Vacheron's an expensive brand, and they showed off ultra expensive things within their own expensive brand, but that almost everyone was showing off really expensive watches. And the number of watches shown at Watches and Wonders is a new reveal that were sub $10,000 retail were very few and far between. And it wasn't always like that. And that's a problem. because that's going to make Watches and Wonders, the argument goes, unappealing for the vast majority of watch enthusiasts, because, well, some people might want to go and celebrate the fascinating technology that allowed IWC to have the most accurate mechanical moon phase in the history of mankind. A lot of people really only want to look at watches that they might one day own. And when you're showing off $100,000+ stuff that they're never going to buy, they lose all interest. So I wanted to know what those of you who are watching live, what is your thought on that? Because I thought that was actually a very strong argument. And I didn't do an in-depth enough analysis to pick up on the fact that there wasn't a lot of affordable stuff shown at Watches and Wonders. Time to Watches, yeah, it did, but that's a separate show. And it gets barely any coverage. But yes, when I went back and looked at the watches I myself talked about, almost everything I talked about was over $10,000. And I had kind of a cross section of things, but I thought it was a really good point, because I mean, a lot of people want to watch, I would assume, want to watch the coverage of Watches and Wonders because they're kind of shopping for things that they want in the future. And maybe they can't get it new. Maybe it would be something they would buy used down the road, have some scratches and save some funding on it. Some of this stuff is starting really, really high. And one of the things I do like about watches is there's this really broad range. I've done this comparison before. This is pinball. Pinball is like starter, used, working, non-electromechanical, but solid state and above games are going to start you over $1,000. And general high-end built pinball machines kind of cap out at $15,000. And in watches, you can get a robust, awesome Casio for easily under $50. But then you've got watches that are over $1 million new. So it's just a really, really broad range. But the problem that pinballs run into in the new and box market is or even with the used markets, prices have moved up so much. A lot of people are priced out of getting new games. You have to know how to work on them and get broken games and fix them. And that's not going to get you any new stuff. And that's pissing people off. Likewise, I would understand people who want and love and collect watches who do not buy $1,000+ pieces are going to be pissed when you can't even talk about the 1,000+ things. Everything's over 10. But anyway, I wanted to throw that out there because it wasn't my idea. It was someone else's concern, but y'all reminded me of it. And I thought that would be something worthy to go ahead and bring up. Thelania says you can also get into Braymont for under $4,000. It's a good point, especially now with the changes. Tuna says that's why they need the Longines, the Tissot, the guys from Swatch. If Swatch was at Watches and Wonders, it definitely would help. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff on the south side of the catalog, the stuff south of Omega, that becomes much more affordable. And Certina, Mido, Tissot, Swatch, regular Swatch. I mean, all of those readily have watches that you can find under $1,000. The lady says, I think things like Wind Up and Intersect are going to continue to grow over the next 3 years. I do as well. But I know like the Wind Ups and such, they tend to get more of the micro brands and such. And that's good for hands-on experience, because one of the biggest frustrations with micro brands from people is maybe they'll take a gander if the watch is affordable enough, but there's no place to go and try a watch on. Like, I know, even though I can't access it in Kansas City, I can go down to Dallas or up to Chicago. I can try on a Vacheron. I can try on a Parmigiani. I can get access to, I know where I can get access to brands. I don't know where I can go and try on a Zelos. Like, I don't know. And I think Wind-Ups can solve that. So Medgas says, yes, they need the Swatch group there. And Neff says, that's a very good point. If these brands want attention, it might be better focused on the 99% of people who aren't multimillionaires. Again, sometimes I think because they're luxury companies that they kind of lose the plot. And I like luxury watches, but there's a big market of people who are really into watches. If they want to exploit the idea of people wearing smartwatches and getting used to wearing watches again, and get them into like cool looking mechanical watches like the micro brands and stuff are trying to capitalize on, these big brands, there's an opportunity there that I feel like they're kind of letting set sail. But win or lose, it doesn't really affect me. I thought it was an interesting point to end on. But okay, that is it This actually turned out to be a much more robust discussion than I thought it would. So thank you everyone who attended live, because you are who made this happen. Otherwise, I'd have been through this in 10 minutes of me just tearing through everything. I will plan for another live stream next Saturday. Obviously, don't know what the topic is yet. Don't know if I'll do another weekday evening night stream. I thought about moving off of Friday because I think Friday is a little crowded. I'm not sure. I don't know when all the other live streams are. And it's like, I'm not trying to stomp on anyone else's live stream or anything. It's just, I've had some people say they can't ever make the Saturdays. And so that's why I've tried out doing a couple of Fridays here, just as a way to let other people kind of do the live thing and get different voices in the chat and such. So that's why I've been doing it. It's just an experiment. So anyway, let me know how it's been going. You can leave a comment. You don't have to leave it in the live chat because I'm about to close the live chat. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. I hope everybody has a really good weekend, and I'll talk to you all in the next video. So take care, everybody.